right. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Let me pull up. Hopefully, everybody can see that. I'm Todd Libby, and who am I? Web developer and designer from South Portland, Maine, with over 21 years in web experience on both the front and back end, as well as design and accessibility. I am a member of the W3C Silver Community Group and the Visual Contrast of Text subgroup member. And I also love lobster rolls, as you can see here. And if you follow me on Twitter, you already knew that. Wow. But that's not why I'm here today. I am here to talk about accessible color contrast. So I'm here to talk about accessible color contrast because we have a problem on the web that I'll get to in a little bit. But first, why is it important and what we need to do to fix it? For those of you who know who Bob Ross is, awesome. For those who don't know who Bob Ross is, I love this quote. I think this quote sums up that we as designers and developers have unlimited power with this canvas we call the web. And this is Bob Ross, painter, art instructor, and TV host, who had some of the most stunning paintings on a public television show that I've ever seen. And he used normally between 7 and 9 colors on his palette. Mr. Ross also used to say, we don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents. But sometimes on the web, we don't have happy accidents. This is not a happy accident. This is an oversight on somebody's part. So I was filling out a form to be notified of a potential conference back in January or February before everything hit. And this is blown up, so maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. I have a hard time seeing it. I had an even harder time seeing it at 12 to 14 pixels on the screen, and I have quote unquote good vision. So I could imagine what somebody, say, with cataracts would be seeing and thinking of the frustration they feel when they stumble upon things across the web like this. So one definition of color contrast, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is this: juxtaposition of dissimilar elements such as color, tone. Oops. Yeah. Let's try that again. Or emotion in a work of art. So why do I speak about color contrast? I speak about color contrast because I have relatives and friends who have visual impairments, visual disabilities, and seeing their frustration and seeing the looks on their faces when they can't perceive something on the web that I can was the force behind this talk. So I'm going to give a few seconds and see if you can guess what the number one common failure in sites today regarding accessibility is on the web. And if you said low contrast or low contrast text, you'd be correct. So in the recent Web A Million report of the top million homepages on the internet, an astounding 86.3% of homepages had errors in the contrast of text. Now, this encompassed everything that was wrong with these homepages. With the report, 98.1% of homepages had detectable WCAG 2 failures, WCAG being Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This was up from 97.8% in February 2019. There are only automatically detectable errors that align with WCAG conformance failures with a high level of reliability. So there could be some false positives, some false negatives, depends on the testing. So you can see the top 6 issues that were the ones that stood out in this test. But for today's talk, I'm focusing solely on low contrast or color contrast. Who are we failing? Well, we are failing as designers and developers, in my opinion, the people on the other side of the glass. Companies are losing potential income because websites and applications are not accessible or fully accessible. There are untapped markets due to lack of education and overall ignorance to the fact there is such a thing called accessibility. And according to the World Health Organization, globally, at least 2.2 billion people have a vision impairment or blindness, and of whom at least 1 billion have a vision impairment that could have been prevented or has yet to be addressed. Of these 1 billion people, this includes those with moderate or severe distance vision impairment or blindness due to the unaddressed refractive error, or as well as near vision impairment caused by unaddressed presbyopia. Globally, the leading cause of vision impairment are uncorrected refractive errors and cataracts, and the majority of people with vision impairments are over the age of 50 years. So I have something to look forward to in January. I had a talk about accessibility with a stakeholder once. And when I pitched accessibility to this vice president, this is what he said to me. I know our customer base and we do not have disabled users. Well, unfortunately, I had to tell him that's what you think because you do not know your customer base. Because you have the potential for future customers as well. But if you do not have accessible websites or applications, you're going to lose those people. I won't go into situational disability, temporary disability, but the fact remains no one knows their customers because of the potential for something to happen, like trauma to the eye, for instance. So back to the definition of color contrast. Another definition from dictionary.com is the change in appearance of a color surrounded by another color. For example, gray looks bluish if surrounded by yellow. And I don't know about you, but I could barely make out the placeholders in this form, and this is blown up. I had a really hard time actually trying to read the form itself. So imagine if you could for a minute, someone with astigmatism would be seeing, as you see here. It's all blurry. So there are 7 types of color blindness: protanomaly and deuteranomaly, protanopia and deuteranopia, tritanomaly and tritanopia, and monochromacy. Color blindness is not complete blindness. Color blindness is just the fact that those who have monochromacy cannot see color. And there are other visual impairments as well: hypermetropia, myopia, cataracts, glaucoma, Stargardt's, and traumatic iritis. Traumatic iritis is inflammation of the iris due to trauma. So I had this about over a decade ago. I had trauma to the eye. What traumatic iritis is inflammation of the iris that may cause syncytial formations between the inflamed myotic iris and anterior lens. So simply put, this was, the lens and the iris in my eye were pressed together and inflamed. And I had to take steroid drops twice a day and a pill once a day to treat my case. And in this time, I still had to work, and traumatic iritis was very, very painful. So what were the tools that I used? Well, I didn't have all the tools that we have today at my disposal, but I did have tools like color contrast checkers. What do I use today, though? Leah Veru has a color contrast checker at the address you see below there. It's a fantastic color contrast checker. It takes in, as you can see, HSLA, RGBA. It takes in hex color, and it takes in named colors as well. Another resource I use for another color checker is Who Can Use. And as you can see there, it shares statistics on each visual type, the percentage of people in the population that have the visual impairment. It also gives you the contrast ratio and the WCAG grading, and with that little box on the right with the simulation of text. And I like to aim for AAA WCAG grading. AA is minimal, but I always tell people, if you can go for AAA, if you can get AAA, go for AAA compliance. And here are some more tools. They're all color contrast checkers. Every person has their own flavor, I guess you could say. So there are those there: the WCAG contrast checker, the WebAIM contrast checker, a site that I used to use called Color Contrast, and Random Ally. What about browser extensions? Well, there are a couple of browser extensions I use often when I do accessibility testing. I use the Wave browser extension, the Axe browser extension, and I use Firefox and Chrome DevTools. The Firefox Vision Simulator, as you can see in the picture on the right, is a experimental feature, and this feature depends on web render, and it's not enabled by default on all platforms. When you go into the About Config page in Firefox to force enable the web render, you can set the preference of gfx.webrender.all to true to start using that simulator, and it's great. I use it often. Chrome, as you can see here, the features built in. There's no config required, and just all you have to do is toggle the element on the page to enable the modal. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, covers a wide range of recommendations for making web content more accessible. And right now, as of 2018, we are up to 2.1. So when you go in and you read, if you read the specs, success criteria 1.4.3 is the visual presentation of text and images of text that has a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1, except for the following. You have large text, incidental text, and logo types. Large scale text and images of large scale text have a contrast ratio of 3 to 1. Text or images of text that are part of an inactive user interface component, that are pure decoration, that are not visible to anyone, or that are part of a picture that contains significant other visual content have no contrast requirement. And with logo types, text that is part of a logo or brand name has no minimum contrast requirement either. And how to meet those success criterion is text that is less than 18.24 or 24 pixel, if not bold, and less than 14 point and 18 and some change pixels, or text that is at least 18 point, if not bold, and at least 14 point, if bold. So with up and coming Contrast 3, there's going to be some changes. And as WCAG progresses in version 2, everything will be backwards compatible. So everything with 2.1 is compatible, backwards compatible with 2. And when the time comes when 2.2 comes out, that'll be backwards compatible with both 2.1 and 2.0. So with that said, new calculations of contrast based on more modern research on color perception. And you can already see these in Chrome Canary. So when you have the modal window over an element, you can see those new scoring changes. Merge Contrast 3 will merge the 1.43 AA and 1.4.6 AAA levels into one guideline. There will be a new test of text contrast, and it only includes textual visual contrast. Now, when I had pets, I used to talk foolish to them or say something silly, and this was the response I would get. So you can imagine my surprise when I went in and I saw this. And if that's a little bright, I apologize. And that's zoomed in. So imagine seeing this at 12 to 14 pixels. Now, white text on a yellow background is the web's version of nails being run down a chalkboard. You have that same spine-tingling, shiver-inducing, horrific experience. This was my reaction. Even at this level of magnification, it's hard for me to make out what the message says. And I don't know about you, but imagine if, you know, traumatic injury to the eye or astigmatism or cataracts, I would wager it's going to be very difficult, if not nearly impossible, for someone to read this with a visual impairment or disability. And we really need to do better than this. We need to start thinking, like I said earlier, about the people on the other side of the glass, the user. We do what we do for the user. We don't build and create things for ourselves in a professional, corporate, or studio setting. We create things for ourselves on a personal setting. But we create things in a professional setting because there's a need or a desire or a want for things to be made for everyone. So why shut people out doing this is my question. So something I wanted to briefly touch on is video captioning. And I had to throw a lobster roll in there. So down on the bottom, I don't know if you can see the captioning very well that I put in there, but there's a lot going on in the background. And most of the time I have found we are forgetting people that need to clearly see what is being captioned on a video. And this is Meryl K. Evans. She's at Meryl K. Evans on Twitter. And Meryl says, readability is the most important aspect of captioning in video. No other rules matter if captions cannot be read, which couldn't be further from the truth. So now, as you see here, you can read the captions. And that's what we see most of the time, is those captions with the darker background. It's more readable. Make sure text stands out from the background in any distractions. So what can we do? We can test with persons with visual impairments. We can hire people with disabilities. We can make accessibility inclusive in the design and development process from the very start. Designers, we can be sensible with colors and color palettes. And designers and developers, we can use the tools. There are plenty of tools out there. So this is a quote I pulled from Jeffrey Seldman's site last year from Blue Beanie Day. Blue Beanie Day being the day every year on November 30th where web standards are celebrated. And Jeffrey said, our industry as a whole thinks less and less about accessibility, not that we ever had an A game on the subject, and talks less and less about progressive enhancement, preferring to chase the ephemeral goalposts of over-engineered solutions to non-problems. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And it all starts with looking at the WebAIM Million report and seeing that color, that contrast of text percentage. So a lengthy report released by the United Nations argued that disconnecting individuals from the internet is a violation of human rights and goes against international law. So as you can see here, and I put the link to that in the slides that I will have, that we have a link in the Discord channel too. The Special Rapporteur underscores the unique and transformative nature of the internet, not only to enable individuals to exercise their right to freedom of opinion and expression, but according to the report's summary, but also a range of other human rights and to promote the progress of society as a whole. This is a quote I use often, and I usually tweet it out once a day. Accessibility is a right, not a privilege. And as you can see here, there's a t-shirt for that. It reminds me every day, and it reminds people I work with, that we need to be more inclusive and embrace accessibility. Accessibility is something we need as designers and developers to bring into our workflows and project kickoffs from the very start. Advocate, educate, push for accessibility. When stakeholders or managers push back, arm yourselves with the knowledge and the power to push back a little harder. It can be done sometimes. Fight for the people that do not have a voice. we have the voice, and we need to use that voice for the people that don't have the voice. So we need to use our voices more. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. So we have time for questions. Are people able to unmute themselves? If someone could just give that a shot.
Test.
Thank you. Or if you have questions, you can head over to Discord and write them there.
I was just wondering where on Chrome tools, where is the accessibility tool that you were talking about? If I go into my Chrome tools, is it under more tools, or is it something that I have to?
There is, let me actually pull up my instance of Chrome. There is an accessibility tab, I believe,
in advanced, or let me see. And so if I go into dev tools, let me just look. Oh no, dev tools is just giving me coding stuff.
So on the very far left on the top, you can toggle the device toolbar, or you can select an element in the page to inspect it.
Oh, okay.
If you click that and choose an element in the page, that modal will pop up for you.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
There is also I believe when you install the Axe browser the browser extension, you get a tab with Axe. It says Axe on it.
Okay. And Axe is AX?
AXE.
AXE.
From DQ, yes, from DQ Systems. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And then the Lighthouse one that's in there too
Oh.
is built off of Axe.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was using Figma for my last two projects, and I was happy to find that there's a plugin available to check color blindness for 8 different types of color blindness. Was really helpful.
They've come along with that tool very much. So yeah, I like when I do use it. I use that one often. Yep.
What tool was that? I'm sorry.
In Figma, it's like Sketch, one of the newer ones to Arena, right? And it has a plugin. I think it's a community plugin. Someone wrote it. I don't think Figma wrote it. And it tests 8 different types of color blindness, and you can just pick one of your frames and run it through, and it shows you exactly what it would look like to those people. It's pretty cool.
Where can we get the plugin?
I'll put a link in the chat.
Thank you.
You put it in Discord so it doesn't disappear instead?
Yeah, I will do that
Okay.
for sure.
I could also copy and paste it there too.
All right. Also, there's Color Oracle for color deficiency, color blindness. And it's same idea. You can do it and it goes over your main screen and puts like a color blindness mask over the screen, so you get an idea that your red and green chart items next to each other aren't going to be able to be told apart.
I'm curious if you could share like what strategies have been successful for you in your experience getting people to care about this kind of stuff, because like I'm a web developer, and I'm lucky the team I work for, we mostly do work with the UK government, so we sort of have to abide by all these government accessibility standards. But I find, yeah, for the most part, this entire industry is just like totally unconcerned with users, period. Like not even like visual accessibility stuff, like pages are slow and janky and buggy, and like user data is not handled carefully or respected at all. And it's like a total mess, and it's like an endless uphill battle to just be like, you should care about this. And like, I don't know how else to say it in a way that gets through to people. So I'm always curious to hear other people if you've made any headway in that, like changing hearts and minds kind of world.
It
It's a lot of
is,
work.
yeah. It is, I understand you totally. It is a never-ending battle. It is a daily battle. What people used to do, I found, was the shame game, and that doesn't work anymore, because
Right.
if you think back to when you were a teenager, and if you know anything like me, I didn't want to listen to my parents when they told me to do something. So why should I listen to somebody else tell me to do something? So what I do now, and what I've done for a long time now, is I try to sit down, or I strike up a conversation online with somebody, and I try to take it the diplomatic route and try to have a civil conversation with them and say, okay, you, for instance, you don't know that some people use the keyboard for navigation, for instance. Try to educate them and tell them, there are other methods to use than just, a mouse or a trackpad, for instance. Some people use a sip and puff. Some people use, voice recognition software. So I try to strike up a conversation if if anybody has a question for me, or, if I run across the people that I, had that one slide there where the VP said, well, we don't have any, disabled users. And I said, well,
It's the most common thing when I say like, oh, we shouldn't ship like 100 megabytes of JavaScript to these people and they're like, oh, none of our users have slow internet. It's like, they might, you don't know that.
yeah. And disability and accessibility is not just physical. It's also for that person that still has a 2G or 3G phone, for instance.
Exactly.
Or they may still have a dial-up connection, and people are kind of, I found, blind to that. So I just, with the VP, I'll use this for an experience. He had glasses on, and I said, well, your glasses are an assistive technology, and that kind of, so I was able to carry that conversation forward, and eventually they said to me, all right, do what you need to do. And that was a day or two of advocating for accessibility. The best piece of advice I got from someone in the accessibility space was, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, when they push back a little harder.
I like that.
One thing I think is a really interesting point around this is that often accessibility intersects with good design, or also helps people that you don't even expect. Like the point of like captioning videos, that also just sometimes people have their audio off and want to look at captions, or like that color contrast text that it's not really great for anyone to have it harder to see, or like in the physical world, like I know I've seen the point of say curb cuts with wheelchair use. Well, that also helps with strollers. Yep. And it seems to be extremely prominent that all kinds of these different things that improve accessibility also help more people than you realize.
I added WebAIM has an article, Hierarchy of Motivating Accessibility Change. I added that to the chat and to Discord. It's more or less, besides the accessibility person telling you so, And then there's another great article by Anna Gibson from on the Pastry Box about alphabet of accessibility issues. So it gets you into more than just, people who are blind, visually impaired, and a bunch of other groups.
I love that.
But
Yeah.
sometimes I go in and just, if the color contrast is off by a little, just go in and change the CSS and hope the
Yeah.
designer never looks at it. I mean, we've done that
Oh, that's your
before
screen, yeah.
with designs where we had a designer. It was like, oh, we got gray on gray. I'm like, no, it's not going to work. Well, I don't want to have to redo the whole comp. This is back years ago. Like, we're just going to change it in the CSS.
Yeah.
Could you, there could be some instances where you could, they wanted to do a certain way that has the, light gray on dark gray and it's absolutely invisible. Say, well, we can do that. It's going to cost you 35% more for us to do that. Now, if you want to do this the right way, you can save a whole lot of money. We'll give you a compliance site for, $1 million, but your uncompliant site's going to be 2 million. Sorry, that just costs us to do that. Obviously, that's not going to work in every instance, but
Right.
Yeah.
There also with accessibility tools, automated tools, I should say, there can be false positives. There can be false negatives. I will throw the example out that I had a project I was working on for a company who had a kind of on the darker side of navy blue background, and they wanted their text on their website, their navigation, to be bright orange reddish. And from first sight, I was like, okay, well, that will work because, it seems like it's going to be passable. And when I ran it through 3 different color checkers, it was coming back as a fail. So I had to manipulate it to where it was on the orange yellowish side of color. And fortunately for me, it wasn't too far off that I could say, what you have for your color is a little off. Is there some way that we can go towards this color? And they were able to work it out where there was a little bit of a rebranding done. So tools, especially the automated ones, they don't necessarily tell you the right thing. And that led me to add late last night, as a matter of fact, scoring will change because right now the scoring it's not ideal for contrast, and color contrast really isn't about color. It's how our brains interpret things. So there's a lot of work going into it. It's a lot of great work. The system, the new scoring system, and it won't be, or it's 2.1 now. You can see it in Chrome Canary. It will be much, much better. Thank you. Appreciate it. So text right now, 4.5 to 1 ratio, or 4.5 to 1 ratio. It should be ideally 10 to 1. So the scoring system's going to change, and it will be for the better.
Because
As far as
everybody
contrast
assumes. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to add in, this is earlier conversation, something that Kira, is it Kira?
Yeah.
Something that Kira asked about, like how to get people in your organization to actually care about accessibility. I kind of have a question, like how much do you think language impacts how they react? Because when we say the words accessibility, when we say the words disability, do they immediately just stop listening? Do they have associations with those words? If you're really trying to get like them to take action on something, would like reframing the language that you use help. Kind of like what Dave was saying was like that a lot of these features actually help more than just like people who have accessibility needs. It's like can help anyone. And if he like framed it like this will help you to reach more users, or this can help you in other ways. What do you guys think?
It can help. I guess it goes, for me, it all depends who I'm speaking with. If they're open-minded, I've met people that are really closed-minded about it. All they care about is a bottom line. So when I come across those people that are, they're all about the bottom line or the dollar, I tell them you could possibly lose a percentage of potential customers and by doing that, you're losing money. And that's when their ears perk up.
So kind of shifting what they are interested in, what they care about, and trying to find where does accessibility fall into that, because it does. Whatever it is that they care about, accessibility will connect to it.
Yes, exactly. Open-minded people will be more receptive, of course, to, okay, I'm listening, and you tell them, there are people that they're not like, I have a hidden disability. I get migraine headaches. And I use that as a classic example whenever I talk to somebody who's more open-minded. I tell them I can't use a computer if I'm in the middle of a, raging migraine.
Yeah.
Like sites that have animation will make me feel nauseous, and then I'm left with vertigo-like symptoms. That's usually when they kind of, okay, they're starting to get invested in it. So I try to relay my personal experience. If I didn't have a lived experience, I would probably go to the example of my relatives that do have disabilities. But yeah, it's in the way that you frame it to the certain people, and usually even with the ones that are pretty narrow-minded, I won't say closed-minded, 9 times out of 10, I'll get a more positive response to, bringing in accessibility. And like I said, when you see you're talking to somebody that cares about dollars, and you mention possible lost income, you'll get their attention fast. So.
Right, because you want them to be able to read or do whatever it is on your site that needs to make the money.
Yeah.
And sometimes the closed-minded ones tend to be those that are the only reason they're doing this is because they're getting sued over it. And you're like, there's part of your problem.
That's the thing too. If you get really stubborn people like I've gotten before, I mentioned Domino's Pizza lawsuit, and they turn their, completely around 180, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we don't want to get sued. And, you're talking about a firm coming in, and you're spending maybe 7 figures or more for a firm to come in and do an accessibility audit.
Guys, I have to jump in because it is 2:15. This talk was awesome. Todd, you rock.
Thank you.
I want to continue and chat with Todd. There's a hallway we could meet there and talk more. So I look forward to seeing you guys in other rooms.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to hang out in the hallway.
Okay.
It's fun in the hallway. It's different from home.
Thank you, everybody.
Good talk, Todd.